Commander James Wilson stood on the helipad of the USS Venture, watching the churning waters of the Bermuda Triangle beneath him. The coordinates matched those in his classified briefing: 25 degrees north, 71 degrees west, the heart of a maritime region that had swallowed ships and aircraft for centuries. 3 minutes to submersion, Commander, the pilot announced. Wilson nodded, his weathered face revealing nothing. At 43, the Vietnam veteran carried himself with military precision, but the shadows under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights. 3 years had passed since he'd lost the USS Thresher and its crew of 87 men in these same waters. The official report cited catastrophic mechanical failure. Wilson knew better. The submersible descended through azure waters that gradually darkened to midnight blue. Wilson watched silently as bioluminescent creatures flickered past the viewport like fallen stars. "First time down, Commander," asked a voice behind him. Wilson turned to face a woman with sharp eyes and silver-streaked black hair, pulled into a severe bun. Her lab coat bore the embroidered name Dr. V. Holt, Chief Scientist. "To Station Abyssal, yes," Wilson replied. "Not my first time in these waters." Something in his tone made Holt study him more carefully. "The Thresher incident. That was your command." It wasn't a question. Wilson met her gaze without flinching. "It was. The Navy doesn't usually give second chances in the Triangle. I didn't ask for one." Their descent continued in silence until the submersible's lights illuminated a structure that seemed impossible at this depth. A sprawling complex anchored to the seafloor 600 feet below the surface. Station Abyssal resembled a massive steel starfish, its 5 arms extending outward from a central hub, each limb housing different research divisions. "Welcome to your redemption, or your grave, Commander," Holt said, her voice softer than before. "Most of us believe they're the same thing down here." The airlock cycled with a hiss, admitting them into the station. Personnel in Navy uniforms and lab coats moved with practiced efficiency through curved corridors lit by harsh fluorescent lights. The air tasted recycled and faintly metallic. Captain Reynolds, the outgoing commander, gave Wilson a perfunctory tour, his demeanor suggesting he couldn't leave fast enough. The electromagnetic anomalies started small, Reynolds explained as they reached the command center. Compass malfunctions, radio interference. Now they're off the charts, and Washington wants answers. "What kind of answers are they expecting?" Wilson asked. "The kind that win wars," Reynolds replied bluntly. "Whatever's happening down here disrupts navigation systems, communications, even affects human perception. Imagine weaponizing that." Wilson was introduced to his senior staff: Lieutenant Commander Hayes, Security Chief; Dr. Nichols, Head of Marine Biology; Dr. Patel, Quantum Physics, and several others whose names blurred together. Each regarded him with the same wary expression, the look reserved for a man expected to fail. That night, alone in his quarters, Wilson reviewed personnel files until his eyes burned. When he finally lay down to sleep, the station's rhythmic humming mimicked the sound of distant engines, reminding him of nights aboard the Thresher. He had almost drifted off when a woman's voice whispered his name: James. Wilson bolted upright, heart pounding. The voice was unmistakable. Catherine, his wife, dead for 5 years. "James, you're getting closer now." He switched on the light, scanning his empty quarters. The digital clock read 3:07 a.m. With shaking hands, he reached for the bottle of pills in his drawer, the ones prescribed for what the Navy psychiatrist had called auditory hallucinations brought on by trauma. Wilson left the pills untouched, listening to the silence broken only by the mechanical sounds of the station. After several minutes, he activated his terminal and began drafting his first official log. Day 1 at Station Abyssal. The mission parameters are clear. Investigate and understand the electromagnetic anomalies for potential military applications. Unstated, but understood. Discover what happened to the USS Thresher and its crew. He paused, finger hovering over the keyboard. Personal note, Catherine's voice again tonight. Stronger than before. Closer. Something about this place is different. I feel it in my bones. We're not studying the anomaly. The anomaly is studying us. Wilson deleted the personal note and submitted only the official log. As he finally drifted toward uneasy sleep, the station lights flickered momentarily, and somewhere in the distance, metal groaned under pressure. 600 feet above, the first clouds of an unseasonable tropical storm began to gather over the Bermuda Triangle, its eye positioned directly above Station Abyssal, as if guided by an unseen intelligence. Morning arrived artificially in Station Abyssal, the lights gradually brightening to simulate dawn, though no sunlight penetrated these depths. Wilson found Dr. Holt already at work in the analysis hub, surrounded by holographic displays of electromagnetic readings. "You look like hell, Commander," she observed without looking up. "Couldn't sleep," Wilson admitted, accepting the coffee a technician offered him. Something about being in a pressurized tin can at the bottom of the ocean. It's not the pressure that keeps people awake down here. Holt manipulated one of the displays, expanding a waveform pattern. "Look at this. Recorded at 3:07 a.m. Wilson nearly choked on his coffee. "What am I looking at?" An EM spike unlike anything we've recorded before. Localized, powerful, and, here's the interesting part, it appeared to originate inside the station, specifically from the residential wing, near Wilson's quarters. At the exact moment he'd heard Catherine's voice. "Could be equipment malfunction," he suggested. Holt's skeptical expression made it clear she didn't believe that any more than he did. "We've been tracking these anomalies for months. They're increasing in frequency and intensity." She lowered her voice. "Between us, Commander, I don't think we're dealing with a natural phenomenon." Before Wilson could respond, Dr. Nichols burst into the lab, breathless with excitement. The marine biologist was young. Too young, Wilson thought, for a post this classified. With perpetually disheveled hair, and an enthusiasm that seemed out of place in the somber facility. "You need to see this," Nichols insisted, connecting a tablet to the main display. "We deployed the remote drones at 0600 for routine exterior scanning. Look what they captured." The video showed the station's exterior. At first, Wilson saw nothing unusual, just the massive structure anchored to the seafloor. Then he noticed movement in the murky waters. Flashes of bioluminescence, unlike anything he'd ever seen, forming complex, almost geometric patterns around the station's perimeter. "What are they?" Wilson asked. "I have no idea. Nichols admitted, his excitement edged with unease. They're not in any marine life database. The patterns they're making. It's almost like communication, Holt finished. They're responding to our presence. Or to something else down here with us, Wilson said quietly. Later that day, Wilson joined Lieutenant Commander Hayes for a security briefing. The ex-SEAL was conducting drills with his team, preparing for contingencies that seemed increasingly likely. Station breach, pressure failure, crew evacuation. Your team seems on edge, Lieutenant, Wilson observed. Hayes dismissed his men before responding. With respect, sir, everyone's on edge. Last week, 2 of my best men reported seeing shadows moving against the current outside their viewports. The week before that, 3 researchers complained about voices in the ventilation system. Have you experienced anything unusual? Wilson asked carefully. Hayes hesitated. 2 nights ago, I woke up convinced someone was standing at the foot of my bed. When I turned on the light, no one was there, but... He paused, looking embarrassed. The floor was wet with seawater. My door was locked from the inside. That evening, Wilson called a meeting of senior staff. One by one, they reported anomalies. Equipment registering impossible depths beneath the station. Communications picking up fragments of transmissions in unknown languages. Crew members experiencing identical nightmares of drowning while being watched by something vast and patient. After the meeting, Maintenance Chief Rodriguez requested permission to investigate an unexplained temperature drop in the station's lowest level. Wilson accompanied him, descending through narrow access tunnels until they reached the dark underbelly of the facility, where massive anchors secured it to the ocean floor. Rodriguez swept his flashlight across the curved metal wall. Temperatures dropped 15 degrees down here, but there's no leak I can find. Wilson's breath fogged in the suddenly frigid air. Could be a sensor malfunction. Sensors don't explain that, sir. Rodriguez directed his light to the floor, where frost patterns were forming. Intricate spiraling designs that grew even as they watched. A sudden bang against the hull made both men jump. Then another. And another. Rhythmic, deliberate. Pressure variations, Rodriguez suggested without conviction. Get back upstairs, Wilson ordered. Have Hayes double the security patrols. Alone, Wilson approached the wall where the sounds had originated. He pressed his palm against the cold metal. The banging stopped instantly. Then faintly, from the other side of the hull, James. Wilson jerked his hand away as if burned. Above him, the lights flickered and died, plunging him into perfect darkness. When emergency lighting activated seconds later, he was running, the echoes of Catherine's voice pursuing him through the bowels of Station Abyssal. On the ocean floor outside, something vast shifted in the sediment, disturbed from centuries of slumber. The tropical storm struck without warning. One moment the surface waters were calm. The next, 50-foot waves crashed across the monitoring buoys tethered to Station Abyssal. Below, the facility swayed almost imperceptibly, like a massive pendulum in slow motion. Communications with the surface are down, reported Lieutenant Diaz from her station. Meteorology didn't see this coming. It formed directly overhead in under an hour. Wilson studied the atmospheric readouts with growing unease. The storm's eye was positioned precisely above them, as if the station had somehow summoned it. How long until it passes? That's just it, sir, Diaz replied, her voice tight. It's not moving. It's just sitting there. Dr. Patel approached with his own troubling data. The electromagnetic readings are off the charts. Whatever we've been studying down here, it's responding to the storm, or the storm is responding to it. Wilson made his decision. Full lockdown procedures. I want all non-essential personnel in their quarters. Double shifts for security. No one goes anywhere alone. As the crew dispersed to their stations, Holt caught Wilson's arm. There's something you need to see. She led him to her private lab, where complex equations covered digital whiteboards. These patterns we've been recording, they're not random, they're mathematical. She brought up comparative displays. This is from 3 weeks ago. This is from yesterday. The complexity is increasing exponentially. It's like what? Like something's waking up. At 2217, Station Abyssal lost power. The darkness that engulfed the facility was absolute, deeper than night. An absence of light so complete it seemed to swallow sound itself. 16 seconds of silence. Then came the blue glow. It began beneath them, a faint illumination seeping through the floor, bathing everything in ghostly azure light. Wilson, making his way to the command center by memory, froze as the corridor around him transformed. The blue light cast no shadows, seeming to emanate from everywhere and nowhere. When he reached the command center, he found the crew transfixed, staring at the main viewport. Outside, the seafloor glowed with the same unearthly blue, revealing what had been hidden beneath centuries of sediment. Massive geometric structures, half buried but unmistakably artificial, extending as far as visibility allowed. "My God," someone whispered. "It's a city." The lights returned as suddenly as they'd failed, accompanied by blaring alarms. "Commander!" Hayes shouted above the din. "We've got a breach. Section 5, the Deep Lab." Security footage showed Dr. Lin and Technician Cooper walking calmly into an exterior airlock. Their movements were stiff, mechanical, their eyes vacant. Neither wore pressure suits. The footage ended as the outer door cycled open, admitting the crushing deep. "When did this happen?" Wilson demanded. "That's just it, sir," Hayes said, his face pale. "This is live. The timestamp shows they entered the airlock during the blackout. But the system shows the outer door is still cycling. They're still alive out there somehow." Wilson stared at the monitor in horror. Lin and Cooper stood motionless on the ocean floor, surrounded by the blue glow, their bodies impossibly intact under pressure that should have crushed them instantly. They were looking upward, as if listening to instructions from above. Then, moving in perfect unison, they began to walk away from the station toward the submerged structures. "Lock down every airlock," Wilson ordered. "Full head count. I want to know if anyone else is missing or acting strange." "Commander," Holt said quietly, pointing to a different monitor. "Look at the sonar." The image showed a massive shape rising slowly from the structures, dwarfing the station with its size. As they watched, it changed direction, moving toward them with deliberate purpose. The station shuddered violently, throwing several crew members to the floor. Alarms blared from multiple systems. "What the hell was that?" Wilson shouted. "Sir," a pale-faced technician replied. "Something just attached itself to the hull." Morning roll call confirmed no other personnel were missing, but Wilson found little comfort in this. Lynn and Cooper were still out there, or whatever they had become. The exterior cameras showed no sign of them or the massive shape that had approached the station. "We need to understand what happened," Wilson told his senior staff. "I want theories, not speculation." Dr. Nichols spoke first. The electromagnetic field could be affecting brain chemistry, hallucinations, suggestibility. "That doesn't explain how they survived external pressure," Holt interrupted, "or the structures we all saw." Lieutenant Diaz, normally the most pragmatic of the team, cleared her throat. "My grandmother was from Puerto Rico. She used to tell stories about the triangle, about a doorway beneath the waves where our world meets another." An uncomfortable silence followed. "Folklore aside," Wilson said finally, "we need to focus on keeping everyone safe while we investigate. Dr. Holt, I want you to analyze the data from last night. Hayes, no one leaves their assigned sections without authorization." As the meeting dispersed, Wilson noticed several crew members huddled around a table in the mess hall. They were drawing the same image over and over with obsessive precision. It was one of the geometric structures they'd glimpsed during the blackout, rendered from multiple angles. "How long have they been doing this?" Wilson asked the mess officer. "Since breakfast, sir." "They don't seem to realize they're all drawing the same thing." Wilson approached one of the artists, Technician Ramirez. "What are you drawing?" Ramirez looked up, momentarily confused. I'm not sure. I saw it in a dream." "We all did." Later, in Holt's lab, Wilson watched her analyze the drawings alongside the brief footage of the submerged structures. "The match is perfect," she said, "but they've added details we couldn't have seen from here. Interior layouts, symbols carved into the walls." She looked up at Wilson. "They're remembering, not imagining." "Remembering what?" "I don't know. But I found something else." She opened a classified file on her terminal. In 1945, the USS Cyclops disappeared in these exact coordinates with all hands. Naval intelligence reported an underwater anomaly of unknown origin just before losing contact. Wilson felt a chill. "You're saying the Navy knew about this place?" "I'm saying Station Abyssal wasn't built here by accident. We're not discovering something new. We're returning to something old." That night, the whispers began. All throughout the station, crew members reported voices in the walls, sometimes familiar, sometimes speaking in unknown languages. Security teams responded to dozens of false alarms as sensors detected movement where there was none. Wilson, making rounds with Hayes, heard it himself. A susurration like distant surf, occasionally resolving into words just beyond comprehension. The sound followed them through the corridors, always seeming to originate from the section ahead. Near the research labs, they found Dr. Patel sleepwalking, his fingers trailing along the wall as if reading Braille. Hayes woke him with a gentle shake. "The equations," Patel muttered, eyes unfocused. "They're solving themselves." In his office, Wilson documented the escalating incidents. The report he prepared for Naval Command was clinical, detached, mentioning nothing of Catherine's voice, which now came to him nightly, growing louder with each visitation. He was almost finished when Holt burst in without knocking. "I found something," she said, placing a data drive on his desk. "Project Sentinel, classified above top secret, initiated after the Cyclops incident. They've been studying this area for decades." Wilson inserted the drive. "How did you get this?" "It was hidden in the station's original blueprints. Look at this." The files revealed that Station Abyssal had been built directly above what the Navy classified as a non-terrestrial archaeological site, discovered in 1947. Initial exploration had ended in disaster when an entire dive team vanished. Subsequent remote studies detected energy signatures suggesting technology far beyond human capability. "Jesus," Wilson whispered. "They built us right on top of it. We're not researchers. We're bait." Holt nodded grimly. "And now it's waking up." A sudden scream echoed through the station, followed by the blare of alarms. They rushed to the source, the medical bay, where Hayes and 2 security officers were restraining a thrashing researcher. He was trying to open the exterior airlock, Hayes explained, struggling to hold the man down. The researcher, Wilson recognized him as Dr. Abrams, was babbling incoherently, his eyes rolling. Blood streamed from his nose and ears. "They're waiting for us," he kept repeating. "The deep ones. They've always been waiting." As the medical team sedated him, Wilson noticed something on Abrams' forearm. An intricate pattern of raised welts, the same geometric design the crew had been drawing. "It's spreading," Holt whispered. "Whatever this is, it's getting inside our heads." Later that night, Wilson woke to find himself standing in the lowest level of the station, with no memory of how he'd gotten there. The metal floor was ice cold against his bare feet. Before him stood Catherine. Not the Catherine of his memories, but something wearing her form, like an ill-fitting mask. Her eyes were black pools, her skin translucent. "James," she said, her voice distorted as if speaking through water. "You need to understand what you've awoken." "You're not Catherine," Wilson said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "No," the figure agreed, "but her memory was here, in you. It gives us a bridge." She gestured to the floor. "Below us, they sleep. The first ones. The originators. They came from beyond the stars when your kind still huddled in caves." "What do you want?" The thing wearing Catherine's face smiled. "To understand. You are so brief, so bright. Your consciousness is a flame that burns and dies in an instant. We want to know why. By killing us? By unmaking you? By taking you apart to see how you work?" Wilson backed away. "I won't let that happen." "It's already happening, James." The figure pointed to his arm, where the same geometric pattern was forming beneath his skin. "We're already inside." By morning, a third of the crew displayed the strange markings. Some, like Wilson, only showed faint patterns under the skin. Others, like Abrams, developed raised welts that formed complex symbols. 5 more personnel had attempted to access the exterior airlocks during the night, stopped only by Hayes's doubled security. In the command center, Wilson addressed what remained of his senior staff. "We're dealing with a non-human intelligence," He stated bluntly, "The evidence suggests it's been here for millennia, dormant until our presence activated it." No one objected. The time for scientific skepticism had passed. "The question is, what do we do now?" Holt asked. Her own arms showed the beginning of the markings, though she'd rolled down her sleeves to hide them. "Evacuation protocols," Wilson decided. "We'll send teams of 4 to the surface in the escape submersibles. Hayes, your security personnel will accompany each group." Hayes shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, the submersibles are... they're not where they should be." "Explain." "The maintenance logs show they were all docked as of 0600. But when my team went to prep them, the bay was empty. The launch logs show no deployments." Silence fell over the command center as the implications sank in. "We're checking the exterior cameras now," Hayes continued, "but visibility is near zero with the storm still overhead." Dr. Nichols, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke. "It doesn't matter. None of this matters. Don't you understand? We're already part of it." Everyone turned to look at the marine biologist. His eyes had a fevered gleam, and the markings covered his face in spiraling patterns. "It's beautiful," Nichols continued, his voice taking on a reverent quality. "The unity, the connection. Each of us, a cell in a greater organism." Before anyone could react, Nichols lunged for the environmental controls. Hayes intercepted him, but not before he managed to initiate a protocol. The viewport shutters throughout the station began to retract, revealing the dark waters beyond. "Everyone needs to see," Nichols laughed as Hayes restrained him. "Everyone needs to see what's out there." Wilson rushed to the nearest viewport. Outside, the water teemed with bioluminescence, not the natural kind, but organized patterns that spelled out mathematical equations, molecular structures, and what looked like circuit diagrams. Beyond them, illuminated by the blue glow, floated Lynn and Cooper, or what had once been them. Their bodies had transformed, elongated, their skin now translucent and pulsing with internal light. They were not alone. Dozens of similar figures surrounded the station, their forms vaguely humanoid, but wrong, like clay sculptures made by someone who'd only heard humans described. "My God," someone whispered. "They're changing," Holt said, her scientific detachment faltering. "Evolving." As if hearing her, the nearest figure, the one that had been Dr. Lynn, pressed its distorted face against the viewport. Its mouth didn't move, but Wilson heard its voice clearly in his mind. "We see you now, all of you. So complex, so afraid. Fear makes such interesting patterns in your consciousness." Throughout the station, crew members fell to their knees, clutching their heads as the telepathic voice invaded their thoughts. "Get those shutters closed!" Wilson ordered, but it was too late. The entities outside were projecting images directly into their minds, visions of the ancient city beneath the sediment, of vast beings sleeping in crystalline chambers, of civilizations rising and falling, while the entities watched from the depths. "They're not just communicating," Holt gasped, blood trickling from her nose. "They're rewriting us." Wilson felt it too, an alien presence sifting through his memories, examining his thoughts like specimens in a laboratory. He fought back, focusing on Catherine. The real Catherine, not the thing that had used her image. Hayes, he managed through gritted teeth. Get everyone away from the viewports. Section off the command center. Now! The security team moved quickly, herding dazed personnel into the interior rooms and sealing the doors. Slowly, the telepathic assault subsided, though Wilson could still feel the entity's presence at the edges of his consciousness, waiting. In the makeshift command post they established in the mess hall, Holt connected her tablet to a display screen. "I've been monitoring the station's structural integrity," she explained. "Look at these readings." The data showed impossible distortions throughout the facility. Corridors that should have been 30 meters long now registered as twice that. Rooms existed where none had been built. Sensors detected multiple instances of the same personnel in different locations simultaneously. "It's not just affecting our perceptions," Holt concluded. "It's altering physical reality." "How is that possible?" Wilson asked. I think what we're dealing with exists partially in another dimension. Its consciousness extends beyond our physical laws. When it reaches into our reality, space-time warps around it." Hayes returned from a patrol, his face grim. "Sir, we've lost contact with Sections 2 and 4. The security cameras show..." "I don't know how to describe it. The corridors keep changing. Doors open to different places than they should. And the personnel? Most are accounted for in secure areas, but we've got at least 15 missing, including Dr. Nichols. We had him sedated and restrained in the medical bay, but when the nurse checked on him, the restraints were empty." Wilson made a decision. "We need to understand what we're dealing with. Dr. Holt, you and I are going to Section 2 to investigate. Hayes, maintain command here. If we're not back in 30 minutes, seal off this section and consider us compromised." The journey through the station became increasingly surreal. Corridors stretched before them, seeming to extend far beyond the physical dimensions of the facility. Rooms appeared where none should be. In one laboratory, they found equipment from the 1940s alongside modern technology, as if time itself had become fluid. "The entity is testing configurations," Holt theorized, "learning how to manipulate our reality more effectively." They reached what should have been the marine biology lab in Section 2. The door slid open to reveal not a laboratory, but a vast chamber that couldn't possibly fit within the station's architecture. The walls pulsed with bioluminescence, and the floor was covered in a substance like black mercury rippling with each footstep. At the center stood Dr. Nichols, or what remained of him. His body had begun the same transformation they'd witnessed in Lynn and Cooper. His limbs elongated, his skin translucent. The markings covered him completely, glowing with inner light. "Wilson," Nichols said, his voice layered with others. "Holt, we've been expecting you." "What are you?" Wilson demanded. "We are the Watchers, the Recorders. We study consciousness across realities." "By destroying it," Holt accused. Nichols tilted his head at an impossible angle. "Destruction implies an ending. Nothing ends. It merely changes form." He gestured around the chamber. "Your species is fascinating. So briefly aware, yet so determined to understand. We've been watching you since you first crawled from the oceans." The disappearances in the triangle, Wilson realized. That was you. Samples. Nichols confirmed, but isolated specimens provide limited data. We needed a controlled environment, a laboratory. He smiled, revealing teeth that had become translucent barbs. Thank you for building us one. They fled from the transformed Nichols, back through corridors that twisted and changed with each turn. Twice they encountered doppelgangers of crew members, perfect copies that watched them with empty eyes before melting into the walls. When they finally reached the secure area, Hayes barely recognized them. Commander, Dr. Holt, you've been gone for 18 hours. That's impossible, Holt protested. We've been gone 30 minutes at most. Time is moving differently throughout the station, Wilson realized. How many more have we lost? 23 confirmed missing, Hayes reported. And those markings, they're spreading faster now. Wilson checked his own arms. The patterns had grown more complex, extending past his elbows. Holt's had reached her shoulders. Most of the remaining crew showed similar progression. I've been reviewing the Project Sentinel files, Holt said, connecting her tablet to a display. In 1952, they conducted an experiment here, an early nuclear test. They were trying to destroy whatever they'd found. Obviously, it didn't work, Wilson observed. No, but look at the readings they recorded during the detonation. She brought up a chart. The entity absorbed the electromagnetic energy. It fed on it. Wilson understood immediately. It's feeding on us now. On our electrical impulses, our brain activity. Not just feeding, Holt corrected. Learning. The more it understands our consciousness, the more it can manipulate our reality. She lowered her voice. And I think I know why it's happening now, after all these years. She brought up schematics of the station. Station Abyssal isn't just a research facility. Look at these power conduits, these sensor arrays. The entire structure is designed as a massive antenna, transmitting and receiving on frequencies that match the entity's energy signature. They built this place to wake it up, Wilson realized, to communicate with it. And now it's communicating back. A technician monitoring the exterior cameras called out, "Commander, you need to see this." The screen showed the waters around the station. The transformed crew members, now numbering in dozens, were arranged in a massive circle around the facility. Between them flowed streams of bioluminescence, forming a complex web that pulsed with increasing intensity. "What are they doing?" Hayes asked. "Building something," Holt whispered. "A machine? A gateway?" As they watched, the pattern began to spin, creating a vortex of light centered on the station. The facility shuddered violently, throwing several people to the floor. "The hull integrity is compromised in multiple sections," reported Lieutenant Diaz. "We've got flooding in sections 1 and 3. Another violent tremor rocked the station. Equipment sparked and failed around them. "It's tearing us apart," Hayes shouted above the alarms. "No," Holt realized, her eyes wide. "It's reconfiguring us. The station is becoming part of whatever they're building." Wilson made his decision. We need to destroy the station, cut off its power source. "The entity feeds on energy," Holt reminded him. "A conventional explosion would only make it stronger." "What about the experimental reactor?" the one testing quantum containment fields. Holt paled. The quantum reactor. That's not just energy. It would create a rupture in space-time itself. Exactly, Wilson said grimly. If this thing exists partly in another dimension, maybe that's where we need to hit it. They formulated their plan quickly. The quantum reactor was located in Section 5, now completely transformed and inaccessible through normal means. Wilson would lead a small team through maintenance tunnels that might still follow their original configuration. Once there, they would overload the reactor's containment systems, creating a quantum explosion that would theoretically disrupt the entity's hold on our dimension. The submersible bay reported 2 escape vessels still intact. Hayes said, "Enough for the remaining crew." "Get them ready," Wilson ordered. "When we trigger the overload, you'll have 15 minutes to reach minimum safe distance." Holt studied the schematics. "I'm coming with you. I'm the only one who knows how to reconfigure the reactor." Wilson wanted to refuse, but he knew she was right. They selected their team, Hayes and 2 security officers who still showed minimal markings. As they prepared to depart, Holt pulled Wilson aside. "You understand this is a one-way trip for whoever stays to trigger the reactor?" Wilson nodded. "I know." "The entity," Holt said hesitantly. "It's been in our heads for days. It knows what we're planning. Then we'll have to move fast." The journey through the maintenance tunnels was a nightmare of shifting architecture and encounters with transformed crew members. One of the security officers was lost when a section of tunnel suddenly extended into darkness, his screams echoing back long after he disappeared from sight. They emerged into a Section 5 that bore little resemblance to the original design. The walls had become organic, pulsing with the same blue bioluminescence. The floor rippled beneath their feet, like living tissue. Equipment had fused with the structure, creating biomechanical hybrids that whirred and clicked without human operation. At the center, the quantum reactor still stood. Though it too had been partially assimilated, its containment chamber glowed with unnaturally bright light, tendrils of energy arcing between it and the transformed architecture. "They're using it," Holt realized, channeling its energy for their transformation. As they approached, figures emerged from the walls. The missing crew members, now in various stages of transformation. Among them was Catherine, or the thing wearing her form. "James," she said, "we've been waiting." The transformed crew surrounded them, their elongated limbs and translucent skin glowing with inner light. Wilson recognized fragments of his friends and colleagues in their distorted features. Nichols' curious eyes, Lynn's methodical gestures, Cooper's steady stance, all preserved like insects in amber, trapped within something alien and vast. "You can't stop what's happening," Catherine's simulacrum said. "The convergence has begun. Soon your dimension and ours will be permanently linked." "What happens to humanity when that occurs?" Wilson demanded. "Evolution, transcendence. Your consciousness will join with ours, as these have." She gestured to the transformed crew. "They understand now. They see beyond the limitations of individual existence." Wilson exchanged glances with Holt and Hayes. The remaining security officer had his weapon drawn, though Wilson doubted conventional weapons would have any effect on these beings. "We don't want your transcendence," Wilson said firmly. "Humanity chooses its own path. Choice is an illusion born of limited perspective," the Catherine Thing replied. "You are already part of us. The patterns within you grow. Soon your consciousness will naturally align with ours." As if on cue, Wilson felt a burning sensation as the markings on his arms pulsed with light. Beside him, Hayes doubled over in pain as his own patterns flared. "We need to reach the reactor," Holt whispered. "Now." Wilson nodded almost imperceptibly. "You know what you're experiencing isn't enlightenment," he called out, trying to distract the entities. "It's consumption. You're not elevating consciousness. You're feeding on it." The Catherine Thing tilted its head at an impossible angle. Such limited understanding. "We do not destroy consciousness. We preserve it. Every mind we've taken over the millennia still exists within us, including your Catherine." "That's not preservation," Wilson countered, slowly edging toward the reactor. "That's imprisonment." The transformed crew began to close in. Hayes and the security officer moved to intercept them, buying precious seconds as Holt reached the reactor controls. "I need time," she hissed to Wilson. "How much?" 3 minutes to reconfigure the containment field, then another 2 to initiate the cascade failure. 5 minutes. It might as well have been an eternity. Wilson made his decision. "Hayes, get Doctor. Holt to the submersible bay as soon as she's done. Make sure the survivors get clear." Hayes understood immediately. "Sir, you can't. That's an order, Lieutenant." Before Hayes could object further, Wilson charged directly at the Catherine Thing, catching it off guard. They crashed into a bank of equipment, Wilson using his combat training to maintain the advantage despite her inhuman strength. "You still love her," the entity observed through Catherine's lips. "Even knowing she's gone, you cling to her memory." "I'm not fighting for Catherine," Wilson grunted, restraining the thrashing figure. "I'm fighting for everyone else you're trying to take." Around them, chaos erupted as Hayes and the security officer engaged the other entities. Equipment exploded in showers of sparks as stray shots hit sensitive systems. The entire section shuddered violently, the organic architecture pulsating with increasing intensity. 2 minutes, Holt called from the reactor controls. The Catherine Thing suddenly went limp in Wilson's grasp, its eyes focusing on something beyond him. "You don't understand what you're doing," it said, its voice suddenly layered with multiple tones. "The quantum breach won't just hurt us, it will fragment us across your reality." Wilson realized with horror what it meant. "Holt, stop the sequence." But Holt had already initiated the cascade. "It's done!" she shouted. "We have 6 minutes before critical failure." The security officer fell, overwhelmed by 3 transformed crew members. Hayes was backed against the reactor housing, fighting a losing battle. "Get to the submersibles!" Wilson ordered, breaking away from the Catherine Thing. "Hayes, that's an order." The lieutenant hesitated only a moment before grabbing Holt's arm and dragging her toward the exit. The transformed crew, sensing the imminent danger, surged after them. Wilson positioned himself between the entities and the escaping pair, buying them precious seconds. "Your time in our world is ending," He told the Catherine thing as it approached. "No, James," it replied with a terrible smile. "It's just beginning." The station lurched violently, throwing everyone off balance. The quantum reactor began to emit a high-pitched whine as its containment field fluctuated. Cracks appeared in the walls, but instead of water rushing in, Wilson glimpsed something else through the fissures. Impossible geometries, colors that shouldn't exist. A void teeming with awareness. 5 minutes until detonation. Hayes and Holt would be racing for the submersible bay. Wilson needed to ensure they had enough time to escape. He spotted the manual override for the reactor housing, a physical switch that would accelerate the containment failure. The Catherine thing saw his intention. "If you do this, you'll scatter us throughout your world. We'll be in the water, the air, the earth itself. Everywhere." Wilson understood then. The entity feared fragmentation more than destruction. In its current form, it was whole, contained. The quantum breach wouldn't kill it, but would shatter it into countless pieces, each retaining a fraction of the whole consciousness. Better dispersed than concentrated, Wilson decided, lunging for the override. The Catherine thing and the other entities swarmed him, but too late. His hand closed around the lever and yanked it down. The reactor housing retracted instantly, exposing the quantum core, a sphere of blindingly bright energy suspended in the containment field. The field itself was visibly degrading, pulses of energy escaping in bright arcs. 3 minutes, maximum. The entities recoiled from the quantum energy, their forms destabilizing in its presence. Wilson felt his own markings burning like fire beneath his skin as the quantum radiation affected whatever had been implanted in him. With a final surge of strength, he pushed past the disoriented entities and ran for the nearest communication terminal. It was still functioning, barely. "Hayes, Holt. Status." He barked into the microphone. "Submersible bay." Hayes' voice crackled back. "Loading survivors now. 2 minutes to launch." "Make it 1, Wilson ordered. "The reactor's going critical faster than expected." He didn't mention that he'd accelerated the process. No need for them to carry that burden. As Wilson turned from the terminal, he found himself face to face with the Catherine thing. Its form was degrading, becoming more fluid, less human. "You've doomed yourself," it said. "I know. And you've scattered us across your world." "Yes." It studied him with eyes that were no longer Catherine's. "Why?" "Because concentrated, you were unstoppable. Fragmented, humanity has a fighting chance." The entity seemed to consider this an interesting hypothesis. "We will test it in the centuries to come." The station shuddered again, more violently. The quantum core was now a maelstrom of energy, the containment field visibly collapsing. Around them, reality itself seemed too thin, space and time becoming malleable as the boundary between dimensions weakened. 1 minute. Wilson thought of the real Catherine then. Not this twisted simulation, but the woman he'd loved. He hoped she would have understood. Perhaps she would have been proud. Launch confirmation. Hayes' voice came through the crackling terminal. "Submersibles away." "Godspeed, Commander." Wilson closed his eyes briefly in relief. Then he faced the entity, wearing Catherine's disintegrating form. "In our world," he told it. Consciousness is fleeting. That's what makes it precious. That's what you never understood. The quantum core exploded in a silent flash of light that seemed to devour reality itself. Wilson felt his body dissolve, his consciousness expanding for one brilliant moment beyond the confines of individual existence. In that expansion, he glimpsed what the entity had been trying to describe: the vast interconnected web of awareness that spanned dimensions. Then, mercifully, darkness. 3 days later, a Navy recovery vessel found the submersibles drifting on the surface of a now calm Bermuda Triangle. Of the 23 survivors, only Dr. Vivian Holt remained conscious. The others were catatonic, their bodies covered in fading geometric patterns. Holt's hair had turned completely white. When questioned about Station Abyssal, she provided a detailed account that military officials promptly classified and then publicly dismissed as trauma-induced delusion. In her secure hospital room at Naval Medical Center Bethesda, Holt methodically covered every available surface with intricate drawings, the same patterns that had marked the crew, now rendered with obsessive precision. When her doctors took away her pens, she used her fingernails to scratch the patterns into the walls. "It's not contained," she told her increasingly concerned psychiatrist. "Wilson didn't destroy it. He scattered it. It's everywhere now, watching, learning. In the water you drink, in the air you breathe." 6 months later, naval intelligence reported a significant increase in disappearances throughout the world's oceans, not just in the Bermuda Triangle, but in all the deep places where sunlight failed to penetrate. In a classified meeting room deep beneath the Pentagon, military officials reviewed plans for a new, larger facility to be constructed near the former location of Station Abyssal. Energy readings from the area had increased tenfold since the incident. The quantum breach didn't eliminate the anomaly, the project director explained. It transformed it. We have an unprecedented opportunity to harness this power. As he spoke, a drop of water fell from the ceiling onto the blueprint before him. No one noticed as it momentarily formed a perfect geometric pattern before being absorbed into the paper. Thousands of miles away, in the deepest trenches of the world's oceans, ancient structures began to stir from millennia of slumber, responding to a call that transcended time and space, a call that had begun in the depths of the Bermuda Triangle and now echoed throughout the world. The deep ones were awakening. And somewhere in the space between molecules, in the quantum foam that underlay reality itself, Commander James Wilson's consciousness endured, fragmented but not destroyed. A prisoner of the very entity he had sought to defeat, yet still fighting, still human, still watching.